Baie welkom aan almal hier vanmiddag by die Leer en Onderrig Seminar. A hearty word of welcome to everybody. It's quite a daunting audience from a variety of divisions and centers and academic departments. So thank you so much for making the time to actually come and hear what we did as a group. I am presenting on behalf of the group, and you will see all of our names on there. Professor Skoonwinkel, many of them are in the room already. Ronald de Prier, Anton Basson, Ingrid Ravitsky, Ian Nell, Aaron Kahl, Berne Gerber, Gert Young, Andre Miller, Johan Lowe, and Cecilia Jacobs as well. So what I'm presenting here this afternoon is a joint research project that the 12 of us embarked on. Okay, so let's get started. As you see, the topic is survival of the fittest or continuous improvement, reporting on preliminary faculty's feedback about the program renewal process at Stellenbosch University. More people? Okay, so that's the topic. Let's quickly look at the topic. First of all, focusing on program renewal process at Stellenbosch University. What we decided as a group, and I'll just now tell you a little bit more about how we got together as a group. But when we talked about program renewal and specifically engaging in the focus group interviews with the faculty members, we had to find a common definition of what program renewal means in terms of the specific focus group interviews. So what I'm presenting here this afternoon is not the definition of program renewal. It is just a definition that we agreed upon as a group to take forward into the focus group interviews. Because we quickly realized, even within the group, we had a variety of definitions. So first of all, we said program renewal is understood as an ongoing process with the goal of continuous improvement through a process of review. So with an emphasis on ongoing and continuous improvement. Second of all, this process of ongoing program renewal is a learning opportunity for all academic staff to collectively understand and reflect on their teaching practice and its consequences for learning. So the whole issue of reflection coming into the definition as well. Last but not least, the third part of the definition, program renewal should be based on self-evaluation, but also validated by a process of external review. So that's the definition that we also provided during our focus group interviews in all 10 faculties to the members of the focus group interviews. Now let's focus on my title. And as I mentioned in the abstract as well, this was not really consulted with the rest of the group, so apologies. I decided on the title. The first element was the survival element. And this is something we really heard in a lot of the focus group interviews. Actually saying the process of program renewal is not a continuous process, it's a matter of survival. And when I think about survival, I don't know if you recognize this fellow. His name is Bear Grylls. And he's the ultimate survivor. A bit muddy at times, and he has a very famous program on television where he engages in parachuting from helicopters, balloons, planes, paragliding, ice climbing, eating snakes, wading rapids, etc., etc. I'm going to spare you all the gory details. So he's the ultimate survivor. And I often think a lot of us academics are also the ultimate survivors because in the face of great adversity, great complexity, and a variety of elements within our lives, we somehow still get to the program renewal part as well. So again, sometimes a bit bruised and battered, but still we get there. So sometimes program renewal, and that's what we also heard from the faculties, is a case of survival as well. But what we also heard in the faculties is that it's also sometimes a process of continuous improvement. And when you think continuous improvement, one often thinks about a linear process in terms of achieving success. But as we all know, a lot of times that continuous improvement is rather messy. And if one really thinks as to why was one successful in this continuous improvement process in terms of program renewal, one cannot really put one's finger on it. Exactly what were the defining factors. And I think that was one of the main aims of this research project we also undertook, was to actually say, what are some of the barriers and enablers that could potentially influence program renewal, so that we could move beyond the just anecdotal to a much more scholarly and research-based approach for Stellenbosch University. And enters the course that we did last year. Okay, so the 11 of us decided, possibly a little bit like Bear Grylls, a true survivor, to engage in a UBC certificate on curriculum and pedagogy in higher education. It's part of the International Faculty Social Leadership Program. So we decided to do this certificate course, the 11 of us. And as part of this certificate, we also had to submit an e-portfolio, and we had to submit a capstone project. What we decided as a group is to not just each do their own individual project, but to focus on program renewal at Stellenbosch University as the overarching theme that we would all investigate. The capstone project was quite extensive. We had to submit a full research proposal containing a literature review, research methodology, research question, and I will share some of the results this afternoon with you. So this is where the 11 of us came together. We had monthly meetings where we discussed, where we read about program renewal and shared our thoughts about it. The main research question that we identified for our project, that informed the project, was what are the strategic ways to conceptualize and implement effective and sustainable program renewal in a South African research-intensive university context. So you can see the emphasis was on strategic, the emphasis was on effective and sustainable. So not just a once-off, but how can we map out a roadmap for Stellenbosch University? How can we devise a strategy for Stellenbosch University to engage in program renewal, not just on an ad hoc basis, but in a systemic way? The question that I focused on and that all the team members actually assisted in terms of the focus group interviews within the faculties was, what are the potential challenges and enablers, and how can these be mitigated? So that was my main focus. But as I said, not only my main focus, but the focus of the group as a whole as well. The research methodology that we decided on was appreciative inquiry. And I promise you, this was lots and lots and lots and lots of discussions during the, how many months? 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months that we gathered, as well as with Professor Harry Hubble from UBC, to find the correct research methodology. And there was a lot of debate about that. Why we decided on appreciative inquiry is highlighted there for you. We wanted to engage key stakeholders in a network improvement community that is grounded in educational inquiry, and very importantly, we wanted to appreciate current best practice examples. So that's why we also went to the faculties and held the focus group interviews within the faculties to find the current best practice examples. We also wanted to consider contextual variables and not just have a one-size-fits-all model. And last but not least, enhance systematic development. Now, as those of you that know appreciative inquiry probably much better than I do, you have the 4D cycle, which focuses on appreciating, then envisioning results, dreaming what might be, what is the world calling for, then on the design phase, what should be the ideal, co-constructing that ideal situation, and last but not least, the destiny, how to empower, learn, adjust, improvise, sustain, and then of course going through that cycle again. So that was the research methodology we decided on for the whole project. Taking into another type of graphic, we wanted to understand what is the status quo at Stellenbosch University at the moment, and what could be a more ideal shared view of program renewal, And then we wanted to know what are the potential barriers and enablers. How do we move from A to B, or A to many ideals and shared views of program renewal? Of course, as part of the project, to really engage in the whole scholarly process, we of course did a literature review, quite extensive, each of us, also collaboratively. And we looked at what does the literature say about program renewal, and specifically, what does it say about the barriers and enablers in terms of program renewal at a research-intensive university? Remember, that was our words that we used. First of all, we were struck by most of the resources in literature review talking about the complexity, and that changes are often made at the individual level because the whole process is so complex, and that institutions, beware, are often hesitant to engage in a full-scale comprehensive curriculum reform process. With regards to the barriers and enablers, Stark and Latuka actually distinguish between 3 levels: external to the university, institutional, and then on a more individual, personal level. I'm looking now if there's more chairs. Magda, daar's nog 'n stoel. Is jy reg? Ek voel sleg almal wat staan. Hier is nog plek, hoor. Okay, so Latuka and Stark actually distinguish between those 3 levels of barriers and enablers. Then in terms of organizational influences, so on an external level, they look at society, government, alumni, actually putting pressure as to say, this is the type of graduate we want, this is the type of engineer, the lawyer we want. So that should actually inform your program renewal process. And what I should also mention with both the barriers and enablers, it's like 2 sides of the same coin. So it can either be a barrier or it could be an enabler, depending on how it is supported. In terms of organizational influences, some of the barriers included long and slow decision-making processes, a shared vision, collaboration, and Mortimer and Sartre actually go as far as to say a program of study is not just a faculty responsibility, but a responsibility of an institution as a whole. So that's the level of complexity involved there. So that's in terms of the organization. And then, of course, very, very important, a support environment and institutional culture that encourages innovation and change. And you'll see this reflecting back when I present the results of the focus group interviews. This specific was reported just about verbatim, and one of the faculty members added to that, and the opportunity to fail. So not just innovate, but also the opportunity, a safe environment where failure is also tolerated. Last but not least, there's internal influences in terms of the individual as a change agent, somebody that's strong, that has strong leadership qualities within the department, within a faculty, and I'm sure a lot of you know those people within your faculties that actually drive innovation, drive program renewal. But of course, there needs to be a core group to oversee the process and actually take ownership. So it's not just up to one individual to do it. Last but not least, enablers through collaboration. One of the issues that was mentioned, and I think that's what's happening on this campus, is one of the enablers would be a community of practice to form a critical mass representative of the university to really get it moving forward. And then, of course, how do you initiate new members into this community of practice? And that would, of course, be through faculty mentorship of more senior people within the community of practice. Okay, let's move over now to the second part. And the second part of the presentation is really very much on what we learned during the focus group interviews of all 10 faculties. The 11 of us, actually there were 12 because Cecilia also helped us, divided into groups, and we did focus group interviews within all the faculties, finding out how is program renewal understood within faculties, and then also what are the enablers and the barriers. We tried to get a representative group in terms of from the vice dean to more junior people, but also tried to get people that have been in the business of program renewal for a longer time, and also those that were not that experienced. And eventually, of course, we got a lot of barriers and enablers, And we used Stark and the TUCAS framework to then cluster them according to department, faculty, institutional, and external. Because it doesn't help if you have all these factors all over the place. We wanted to cluster them to really understand what is the status quo at Stellenbosch University. Remember, going back to my slide, appreciating and finding out what is happening within the faculties in the departments with regard to program renewal. So with regards to the preliminary findings, external, also correlating quite closely with the literature, was the influence of external stakeholders on the process of program renewal in terms of alumni, professional bodies, as well as industry. We heard that very clearly, especially in the professional categories. In terms of institutional, we heard the issue of leadership and ownership. And again, as I said, it's two sides of the same coin. If there's leadership and ownership, yes, program renewal could work. If there's no leadership, no ownership, of course, it's possibly failing. Very, very important, adequate resource and time. That came up again and again. Institutional support. This also came up, a collaborative approach with faculty members and support staff from a variety of divisions working together. An institutional culture conducing and promoting change, and you'll see there's the added little bit, and allowing for failure. So a safe space where we can actually engage in program renewal activities with the issue of allowing for failure. Then effective institutional processes and monitoring and evaluation. Monitoring and evaluation was quite an interesting one because somebody in one of the focus groups said, but how would we know when we're there? So we're talking about this continuous process of program renewal at Stellenbosch University, but what will be the factors that will actually determine our success? On faculty, departmental and individual level, we also heard the individual agencies of lecturers taking initiative as well as recognition and reward for their efforts and how important that is. And I think we're at a wonderful stage at this university at the moment with a new strategy for the recognition and reward for good teaching and learning was approved last year by Senate. And it's in the faculties at the moment. And I think this is very, very important because this creates the culture within the institution to actually enable program renewal to happen. And then very important, something we should not forget, and that's the importance of the student voice in program renewal as well. Last but not least, there were many tensions identified. I'm just talking about three. The one is the external needs of the alumni, industry, professional bodies versus the needs of the university. What is a university? What is a university? What should Stellenbosch University be? What type of graduate should we deliver? Is it just a qualified engineer or medical doctor? Or what else does the university bring to the table? So that was one of the tensions that was identified. Teaching versus research, the research-based institution. Remember our original question? We situated our research question very much within that paradigm. And then last but not least, where I took my title from, Program Renewal as Survival versus a Necessary and Valuable Continuous Process. So that's some of the feedback and preliminary findings. Of course, there's lots of limitations in terms of our claims and lots of scope for future research. And that's why we're also having this seminar this afternoon to get your feedback to find out whether what we're saying resonates with your own experience as well as what should be different in terms of our approach. Of course, we were limited by our sampling. Of course, there was the limitation of the focus group design and the questions we asked. We could have asked totally different questions. Also, the framework or the lens used to analyze data. And this is, of course, just a first preliminary analysis of the data that we have. And further research could include alternative frameworks, broader sampling, and of course now to extrapolate actually a strategy, including the mitigating factors. The third part, I just want to quickly allude to Professor Schoenwinkel's part of the project because I think it ties it very nicely together. If you're saying and sitting there now and saying, so what? where to now. We've talked about the barriers and enablers. We've talked about the output of this project, but where to now? Professor Schoenwinkel looked very strongly in his part of the project to an appropriate strategy for scholarly and practical process of institution-wide program renewal for the vice-rector learning and teaching. And some of the preliminary findings, and some of you may have seen this slide, points to a holistic, integrated approach to program renewal at Stellenbosch University. We've got the program, but also the co-curricular and the curricula playing into it, with the divisions of learning and teaching enhancement and student support services being able to provide support, but then also looking at where are the students coming from? What are the capabilities that they bring with them? What type of students are these? And that's where the division of prospective students, academic administration could assist. And then, of course, what is the data around the program in terms of effectiveness, sustainability? Very glad Ian is here this afternoon as well. Institutional research and planning. Birgit, I see here as well. She's brand new at the back from Student Support Services as well. So I think there's a myriad of role players ready to assist faculties and walk the path with you in terms of the program renewal process. So it's not a solitary Bear Grylls survival type of thing where you've got to go your own, but really it's a team effort. We want to take hands, both the support divisions plus the faculties, to move forward. Of course, there were also limitations in terms of this design. It's just a start. This is just a discussion document that I'm presenting here today in terms of barriers and enablers. It's not a full strategy. It hasn't been worked out completely. It is just a discussion document. And what will follow now is an orderly process where a work group will be defined to actually work on a strategy and a roadmap for program renewal at Stellenbosch University. Very important, we really want to take a holistic approach to program renewal instead of just the usual incremental changes. So we hope to move from the scholarly UBC course, and we hope to apply many of the methodologies that we learned during this process to a Stellenbosch University institutional program renewal stage. This is just some of the feedback that we got at the SOTL conference. This is a word cloud. Just to give you an idea of what people thought, they talked about support, stakeholders, process, program, change. Change was quite an important one when we talked about program renewal, and one of the underlying themes that kept emerging as we were talking about program renewal, and I think something that we've got to take note of. So maybe in conclusion, program renewal is both survival of the fittest and continuous improvement, because it's all about change. And I think if we look at how higher education is changing, how our student body is changing, how teaching and learning is changing, I really think that this is the best moment Stellenbosch University has at this stage to start with a contextualized strategy for program renewal at Stellenbosch University. So I hope we'll turn all those barriers into enablers, all those threats into opportunities through this process. And of course, as one always should end, those were some of our references, but I could possibly fill another, I see Professor Schoenwinkel is laughing. We could possibly fill another 20 slides, right, Renal, Anton? So again, I want to, in conclusion, acknowledge all the fellow group members, the 11 of us that participated in this process. Today is really being a way to share, and we would love to have your questions, your thoughts, your bright ideas, anything that you would like to share with us, because this is part of the whole process of program renewal. Thank you very much.